items as well. So there's actually also an opportunity during the agenda item to speak on that if you so choose. So we will begin with, in fact, the public hearings. Public hearing 1, public hearing on resolution number 2268 relates to item 11.1, a resolution to annex and approve a plan of services for properties at tax map 92, parcels 11.01 and 11.02, including a portion of roadway located off Rock Springs Road into the city of Columbia, Tennessee. This is Ward 5. Anyone in the audience this evening wish to be heard on public hearing number 1? Seeing none, anyone on council wish to be heard on public hearing number 1? Hearing none, entertain a motion to close public hearing number 1. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green. Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye. Public hearing number 1 is now closed. Next item, 2. Public hearing on resolution number 2269 relates to item 11.2 on the agenda, a resolution to annex and approve a plan of services for portion of properties at tax map 90, parcel 30, and tax map 99, parcel 11, located off Tom J. Hitch Parkway and Iron Bridge Road into the city of Columbia. This is Ward 3. Anyone in the audience this evening wish to be heard on public hearing number 2? Seeing none, anyone on council wish to be heard on public hearing number 2? Hearing none, entertain a motion to close public hearing number 2. It's been properly moved
Seconded.
and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, take the vote, please.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye. Public hearing number 2 is now closed. Next item 3. Public hearing on ordinance number 4420 relates to item 10.1 on the agenda, an ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget ordinance number 4404, providing for revisions to the general state street aid, sanitation, capital projects, and wastewater funds. Anyone in the audience this evening wish to be heard on public hearing number 3? Seeing none, anyone on council wish to be heard on public hearing number 3? Hearing none, entertain a motion to close public hearing number 3.
Move to close.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye. Public hearing number 3 is now closed. Next item 4. Public hearing on ordinance number 4421 relates to item 10.2 on the agenda, an ordinance to amend the Connect Columbia Comprehensive Plan Land Use Designation Supplemental Overlay for tax map 92, parcels 11.01 and 11.02, located off Rock Springs Road by removing from Special Area 7 Interstate Gateway. This is Ward 5. Anyone in the audience this evening wish to be heard on public hearing number 4? Seeing none, anyone on council wish to be heard on public hearing number 4? Hearing none, entertain a motion to close public hearing number 4.
Make a motion.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green. Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye. That item is now closed. Next item 5. Public hearing on ordinance number 4422 relates to item 10.3 on the agenda, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400, the same being the zoning ordinance for the city of Columbia, by zoning properties being annexed by resolution 2268 located off Rock Spring Road at tax map 92, parcels 11.01 and 11.02 to neighborhood character district, Ward 5. Anyone wish to be heard on public hearing number 5? Seeing none, anyone on council wish to be heard on public hearing number 5? Hearing none, entertain a motion to close public hearing number 5.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green. Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is now closed. Next item 6. Public hearing on ordinance number 4423 relates to item 10.4 on the agenda, an ordinance to amend the Connect Columbia Comprehensive Plan Land Use Designation for tax map 112, parcels 22, 23, and 24, located off Trotwood Avenue from suburban neighborhood to suburban corridor. This is Ward 4. Anyone in the audience this evening wish to be heard on public hearing number 6? Seeing none, anyone on council wish to be heard on public hearing number 6? Hearing none, entertain a motion to close public hearing number 6.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Moller.
Aye. Public hearing number 6 is now closed. Next up, 7. Public hearing on ordinance number 4424 relates to item 10.5, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400, the same being the zoning ordinance for the city of Columbia by rezoning tax map 112, parcel 23, and a portion of parcel 22 located off Trotwood Avenue from neighborhood large lot character district to commercial planned unit development. This is Ward 4. Anyone in the chamber wish to be heard on public hearing number 7 this evening? Seeing none, anyone on council wish to be heard on public hearing number 7? Hearing none, entertain a motion to close public hearing number 7.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Moller.
Aye, that item is now closed. Next item, 8. Public hearing on ordinance 4425 relates to item 10.6, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400, the zoning ordinance of the city of Columbia, Tennessee, by approving the Highland Convenience Market Trotwood Avenue PUD master plan located at 4015 Trotwood Avenue, being tax map 112, parcels 22, 23, and 24, Ward 4. Anyone in the audience this evening wish to be heard on public hearing number 8? Seeing none, anyone on council wish to be heard on public hearing number 8? Hearing none, entertain a motion to close public hearing number 8.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Ms. Dale, take the vote, please.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Moller.
Aye. Public hearing number 8 is now closed. Next item, public hearing number 9. Public hearing on ordinance number 4426 relates to item 10.7, an ordinance to amend the Connect Columbia Comprehensive Plan land use designation for portions of tax map 90 parcel 30 and tax map 99 parcel 11 located off Tom J. Hitch Parkway from urban neighborhood to urban corridor. This is Ward 3. Anyone in the audience this evening wish to be heard on public hearing number 9? Hearing none, anyone on council wish to be heard on public hearing number 9? Seeing none, entertain a motion to close public hearing number 9.
So moved.
Been moved and been properly moved by Councilmember Green, properly seconded by Councilmember Coleman. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Moller.
Aye. Public hearing number 9 is now closed. Final public hearing. Public hearing on ordinance 4427 relates to item 10.8, an ordinance to amend ordinance number 4400, the same being the zoning ordinance of the city of Columbia, Tennessee, by zoning portions of properties being annexed by resolution 2269, located off Tom J. Hitch Parkway at tax map 90 parcel 30 and tax map 99 parcel 11 to neighborhood character district, general urban character district, and general urban corridor character district, again, Ward 3. Anyone in the audience this evening wish to be heard on public hearing number 10? Seeing none, anyone on council wish to be heard on public hearing number 10? Hearing none, entertain a motion to close public hearing number 10. Been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Moller.
Aye. Public hearing number 10 is now closed. Okay, now we'll take a deep breath, and I'll once again welcome everyone here. You weren't at the wrong place if you were beginning to question that. You now are at the formal city council meeting for the city of Columbia on October 13th. We'd like to welcome all of you who are here in attendance this evening, and also those of you who may be watching on live stream or sometime after the meeting is over. I would point out, as I like to, especially when we have a big crowd of folks who might not normally attend those public hearings that we went through, while in some ways seems a little bit perfunctory or just a matter of obligation, it's actually an opportunity for folks who might have concerns or questions to be able to be heard. And so we do believe that it's an important piece of this meeting, and that's why we go through those. As you heard, most, in fact, all of those items are actually also tied to an agenda item. So there will be formal votes on those items, but at least we have the public hearing out of the gate to start. The other thing I'd like to say, you may notice that some of us on council up here tonight, and there's some others in the room, are wearing our Breast Cancer Awareness Month shirts. We're not always in t-shirts, but tonight we are, because we wanted to support the various city departments across Columbia today, all of who were wearing their shirts in honor of and in support of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. As you know, the city of Columbia is so fortunate to have Murray Regional Medical Center in our backyard that does such good work when it comes to breast cancer and awareness and all of the the good work in the community that it does. And so today's opportunity to show our support, not just for the medical providers and our hospital, but also to support the city government. And Donna Osmond with the Public Works Department, I know, was instrumental, Jeff Dwyer, in putting this together. And so if you'll please make sure you send our thanks from this council for her bringing awareness to the very important cause. And I think speak for all of us on council to say we're very honored to take part and appreciate the opportunity. With that, we'll now move into the meeting and ask our Madam Clerk, Ms. Dale, to please call the roll.
Mr. Coleman,
Here.
Mr. Green,
Here.
Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Here.
Ms. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Here.
Mayor Moeller.
Here, let the record reflect all members of council are present. Would like to point out that we do have Mr. Jablonski tonight sitting in for the city manager. And Mr. Jablonski, we're grateful that you're here. We'll now move on to the invocation by Clay Gentry of Jackson Heights Church of Christ. Mr. Gentry, if you'll please come forward. And as he's coming forward, I would ask everyone to please stand as they are able as he leads us in the invocation. And please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Vice Mayor Krista Martin.
Let us pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much that you have given us this country in which we can live and enjoy its freedoms. And we are especially grateful for the freedom of assembly of this nature, that the business of our fair city can be discussed openly and fairly and justly. And we pray, Heavenly Father, that you would bless those who lead us in our town with wisdom, with knowledge and understanding, that they will do so fairly, seeking the good of us all. And we ask for your blessing upon those who serve and those who protect us. We pray, Father, for your blessing to be upon them. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Can we say the pledge, please? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you, Mr. Gentry. All right, we'll now move into section 4, approval of agenda. As you know, there have been 3 updates to the agenda from our study session. Those include the additions of item 7.16, which is on the consent agenda, and then items 8.2 and 8.3 under administration. So those are 3 add-ons from the study session agenda, which are now part of tonight's agenda. And with that said, we will entertain a motion to approve that agenda. Motion's been made and properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Moeller.
Aye, the agenda is approved. Next item tonight, we do have one presentation, item 5.1, presentation of a proclamation to Holly Bell and Columbia Academy staff. And I know we have a lot of visitors tonight for that. So I would ask Holly and all of the folks who are here with her and in support of her, and also representatives perhaps from Columbia Police and Columbia Fire to come forward as well. We'll meet you down in the dais at the podium with the Vice Mayor and myself. Hey, buddy. Well, just want to say thanks for allowing us to have this opportunity. You know, Vice Mayor's been around a long time, and I've had the opportunity to also be around in some of these presentations. One thing we take for granted is there are really good things happening in the city of Columbia on a daily basis. And we don't tell that story often enough. And so sometimes we have the opportunity to tell a really good story that we think the community needs to know, because they have an opportunity to hear about the good things that are happening that they otherwise wouldn't know about. So we're really excited for this presentation tonight. I'm going to read a little proclamation that'll explain the story, and you'll see why we felt it was important enough to sort of pause some things and make sure we could make that proper honor. Whereas the 2022-23 school year began for Columbia Academy on August 1st, 2022. During the first week of school on Friday, August 5th, junior kindergarten student Trip Talbot was enjoying the playground with his fellow classmates. He lost his footing on the ladder to the slide that resulted in him having a fall approximately 5 to 7 feet. Former nurse and current teacher's aide for Miss McCullough's junior kindergarten class, Holly Bell, sprang into action. She reached Trip and saw that he was doing a difficult breathing, which looks like a person is breathing, but they are not actually pushing any air. Holly quickly assessed the situation and performed one rescue breath, which gave Trip breath he needed. Immediate action was taken by staff and calls were made to emergency personnel, and the entire Columbia Academy administration was on hand ready to assist and perform the roles that they had been giving during such an emergency situation. Director of Security, Ben Jones, President of Columbia Academy, Dr. James Thomas, and Lower School Principal Marty DeJarnett are among the leadership at Columbia Academy that ensures their staff is well trained and ready for emergency situations, and we certainly saw this play out on August. Thankfully, Tripp has fully recovered and is enjoying the life of a junior kindergarten student due to a Columbia Academy staff who we're honoring today, and then also the partnership of Columbia Fire and Rescue, Columbia Police Department, and EMS. Now, therefore, I, Chaz Mulder, Mayor of the City of Columbia, do hereby proclaim Thursday, October 13th, 2022, as Holly Johnson Bell Day in Columbia, Tennessee, and urge all citizens to join in recognizing the staff, especially Holly Bell at Columbia Academy, for the actions taken to save the life of their students. Congratulations. I just want to say thanks to Dr. Thomas and Ben Jones as well. This is also for y'all. And Dr. Thomas, I don't know if you might take the word.
Thank you for recognizing Holly. We're extremely proud of you. Thank you for the whole situation, all the team that's part of it. Also, I want to thank you and the city manager for the wonderful police and fire leaders that we had at EMS. They were there, like, did a great job. We're happy today.
Very good. Holly, would you like to say anything? The team that was back there rooting you on, that was great. I can see they're back there. What about you, Trip? You want to say anything, buddy? No? Okay. Do you mind if we take a picture with you? All right. Y'all come on in. We'll get a quick photo. Trip, how about you come stand right here in front of me? How about that? Stand right here.
Baseball practice.
I see that. We got to get you out of here. Thank you, Kelly. And I see Tripp's family is also here tonight too, so we're glad y'all are here. All right. Thank y'all so much. I was looking for you. I knew you were here. I didn't know you were right there. Appreciate it. Good to see you. I will say, you're welcome to stay. Like, this is the time we always like to tell our visitors to stay. Perfectly okay. All right. Thank you so much. Trip, you're going to make it to baseball just in time, buddy. Thank you. All right. We'll move on now to Section 6, Organizational Business. Item 6.1, approve the minutes of the September 8th, 2022 Special Called City Council meeting.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Mr. Jablonski. I'm sorry.
Coleman.
Madam Clerk, Ms. Dale.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye. Item 6.1 is approved. Next item, 6.2, approve the minutes of the September 8th, 2022 City Council meeting.
Move for approval.
Second.
Been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 6.2? Hearing none. Ms. Dale.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye. That item is approved. Next item, 6.3, approve the retirement benefits for Jamie Reed, Police Sergeant, Police Department.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye. That item is approved. Next item, 6.4, approve the retirement benefits for Daniel Hill, Firefighter, Fire Department.
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded by the Vice Mayor. Any discussion on item 6.4? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 6.5, approve the mayor's reappointment of Micah Moore Fleming to the City of Columbia Beer Board for a 3-year term that began on June 18th, 2020 and expires on June 18th, 2023.
Move for approval.
That item's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion on item 6.5? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green. Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 6.6, approve the mayor's reappointment of Demetrius Dooley to the City of Columbia Beer Board for a 3-year term that began on October 18th, 2021 and expires on October 18th, 2024.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 6.6? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green. Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye. Item 6.6 is approved. Next item, 6.7, approve the appointment of Lacey Samuel to the City of Columbia Arts Council to fill an unexpired term that ends on March 12th, 2023.
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 6.7? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 6.8, approve the mayor's reappointment of George Viralis to the City of Columbia Board of Zoning Appeals for a 3-year term that began on December 14th, 2020 and expires on December 14th, 2023.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 6.8? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green. Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 6.9, approve the mayor's reappointment of Jimmy Duggar to the City of Columbia Board of Zoning Appeals for a 3-year term that began on September 12th, 2022 and expires on September 12th, 2025.
Move for approval.
Been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 6.9? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green. Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Mulder.
Aye, that item is approved. Next, section 7, the consent agenda. These items that are deemed non-controversial, requiring no additional discussion, and therefore will be read collectively and voted on collectively. Beginning with item 7.1, approve disbursements for the month of August 2022 in the amount of $4,685,430.77. Item 7.2, approve and authorize the disposal of surplus equipment. Item 7.3, approve the certification of the City of Columbia real and personal property tax assessments for the year 2022. Item 7.4, approve and authorize the mayor to sign the memorandum of understanding between the City of Columbia and Murray County Board of Education. Item 7.5, approve and authorize the mayor to sign the contract renewal between the City of Columbia and Crowd Drift Marketing Platform in the amount of $8,000 for the Visit Columbia TN website. Item 7.6, approve the mayor to sign a contract between the City of Columbia and Q1 Media for digital marketing services in the amount of $15,000. Item 7.7, approve the bid award to Glass Doctors Columbia for replacing front and east side of windows on the annex building in the amount of $30,004.33. Item 7.8, approve the bid award to Mid-10 Paint Pros for painting outside of the annex building in the amount of $33,225. Item 7.9, approve and authorize the mayor to sign a memorandum of agreement with members of the South Central Regional Healthcare Coalition. Item 710, approve a bid award to Columbia Oil for a storage tank and installation in the amount of $67,899. Item 711, approve the purchase of a snow plow and salt spreader assembly in the amount of $55,273 using Sourcewell contract. Item 7.12, authorize payment in the amount of $35,000 to Environmental Systems Research Institute, Inc. for software maintenance for fiscal year 2022. Item 7.13, approve and authorize the mayor to sign amendment number 1 to the State of Tennessee Department of Transportation contract for improvements at and around the intersection of Nashville Highway and Bear Creek Pike, Ward 5. Item 7.14, approve and authorize the mayor to sign the NTQL analysis service agreement for the amount of $3,999. Item 7.15, approve and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement for professional services with T-Square Engineering for wayfinding gateway monument sign construction documents for the amount not to exceed $22,250. Item 7.16, approve the annual renewal of cyber insurance with the Coalition Insurance Solutions and the payment of premium to insurance broker in the amount of $32,671. And that is your consent agenda, items 7.1 through 7.16.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The consent agenda is approved. Next item, Section 8, Administration, Item 8.1, request from Vikarmyar Patel for an extension of his certificate of compliance for 5,000 Trotwood Avenue. I do not see that Mr. Patel is here or that anyone has signed up to speak on this item. Mr. Jablonski, did you have anything on that? Or
Mayor, staff does not recommend proceeding with the extension this time.
and Mr. Patel is not here this evening.
Make a motion to deny.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 8.1? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Moller.
Aye. Item 8.1, motion to deny, has been approved. Next item, 8.2, approve addendum number 2 for the agreement with Reagan Smith and Associates, Inc. regarding the South Garden Street Streetscape Enhancement Project in the amount of $168,000. This is Ward 2. And I know we have Mr. Gunther here this evening, so Mr. Jablonski, I'll defer to you first.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Gunther represents Reagan Smith, and we were going to ask him to come up and give a brief presentation that covers both 8.2 and 8.3.
Mayor Mulder, City Council members, pleasure to be here tonight. Did you want to pull up the image at all of the streetscape? Is this the appropriate time to do that? So while we're getting the image on the screen, just wanted to say I'm very pleased to be part of this process. This is really the culmination of the Arts District Master Plan that was concluded several years back, and it highlighted the idea of taking part of the Arts District and really trying to enhance the streetscape and the public opportunities along the streetscape just to celebrate some unique things about the city. This is something that we've worked quite a bit with stakeholders on. We've talked about different alternatives. Where we landed was turning this street into a one-way street, which allows us to really enhance the amount of sidewalk, the amount of public space that we have. I think the amount of interaction with the businesses that can occur along that street. In addition to that, it allows us to really start to better define our formal parking spaces, make sure everything is ADA compliant, and add some landscape enhancements just to make it a pleasant place to be. So we did receive bids on the project. City felt very comfortable with a bid from Adams Construction. And so now we are seeking the opportunity to continue to work with the city and helping you with construction administration services. So I'm basically here to answer questions or add any elaboration to that thought process.
Councilmember Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor.
I just want to say thank you for this. I've been involved since the very beginning. I feel like it was about 2 years or so ago before I got on council. The process was really straightforward. I feel like it was a great opportunity. Lots of opportunities were provided for the public to put input. And I know we're not seeing all of the mock-up designs that we've seen before, but besides the one we're seeing now, but the things that we are seeing on there were all things that people had input on. And so it's really cool to me to see this really coming to fruition now. So thanks for the great work.
Yes, thanks, Councilman. Yeah, we're excited too. It's good to see something come to fruition.
Yeah, Councilmember Coleman, I feel like we were probably both at that same meeting on this very street where we were able to provide input, and not just, council members, which you weren't a council member at the time, but community members, which is what you were at the time. And not only community members, but also business owners on this street as well that were able to have an input on what they thought and what their vision was. And so I do believe that this is an incorporation into that, and I'm really grateful for it. Vice Mayor, did you have something?
Yes, Mayor, members of council, it's always important when you're doing a project like this to get that input from the citizens and the business owners. And so I'm just excited to hear you say and reinforce that was done. And Mr. Coleman, even before you got on council, you knew that we were out there leveraging the input from the citizens. And that's always so important.
Anyone else have anything on this item? Again, I think it just should be pointed out. I mean, this is a big deal for a number of reasons, but importantly because of what it will do for the Arts District. And I think we talk a lot about wanting to see that Arts District continue to move forward and continue to thrive. And they do a lot of that on their own through private enterprise and through the open market. But there are some opportunities I believe we have as a city government that can help with that vitality. And I think this is certainly putting a very good foot forward in that regard. So we've heard from Mr. Gunther. Anything else from Mr. Gunther this evening? Hearing none. Kevin, thanks for being here. We
Yes,
really
sir.
appreciate it.
I will add a kind of a fun detail to this project. You mentioned the art district and the chance to celebrate that. And part of what will happen on the enhancements is there's going to be pedestals that will give opportunity for public art to be displayed and rotated. And so I think that's the first time we've really had a chance to integrate that into a streetscape project. And that's going to be exciting.
Perfect. First time to do it, for sure.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Thank you, Mr. Gunther.
Thank you.
So we are on item 8.2, which I have already read, and which is also tied to 8.3, but we'll read 8.2 first, and I guess we'll entertain a motion to approve item 8.2.
So moved.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any other discussion on item 8.2? Hearing none, Ms. Dale, call the vote, please.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green? Ms. Hardison? Mr. Marshall? Ms. Wiles? Vice Mayor Martin?
Aye.
Mayor Mulder?
Aye. Item 8.2 is approved. Next item, 8.3, approve and authorize the mayor to execute the contract with Adams Contracting LLC for the South Garden Street Streetscape Project in the amount of $2,132,231.75.
For approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, take the vote, please.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Ms. Hardison? Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles? Vice Mayor Martin?
Aye.
Mayor Mulder?
Aye. Item 8.3 is approved. That completes Section 8. We'll now move to Section 9, Resolutions. Item 9.1, Resolution 2273, a resolution to ratify the City of Columbia's application for the Tennessee Highway Safety Office 2022-2023 Highway Safety Grant for $20,000 and authorize the mayor to execute documents related to accepting and administering the grant.
Move. Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Marshall to approve. It's been properly seconded by the Vice Mayor. Any discussion on item 9.1? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Ms. Hardison? Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles? Vice Mayor Martin?
Aye.
Mayor Mulder?
Aye. Item 9.1 is approved. Next item, 9.2, Resolution 2275, a resolution accepting a monetary donation in the amount of $3,000 from Atmos Energy to be utilized by Columbia Fire and Rescue for the purchase of smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms for distribution.
Move to approve.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 9.2? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Ms. Hardison? Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 9.3, Resolution 2276, a resolution accepting a donation of an executive desk in Credenza from Brent L. Christopherson to be utilized by Columbia Fire and Rescue.
Move for approval.
Been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 9.4, Resolution 2277, a resolution accepting a donation from Muletown Disc Golf in the amount of $600 for 34 signs for the disc golf course at Woodland Park. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 9.4? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 9.5, Resolution number 2278, a resolution to accept the ownership and maintenance of sewer improvements serving the Ridge at Carter Station, Phase 2, Ward 5. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 9.6, Resolution 2279, tax corrections.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 9.7, Resolution 2280, a resolution accepting an in-kind donation from Spacewalk MCT for the use of a bounce house for the Fall into Fun program. The use of the bounce house during this program is valued at $150. This is through the Parks and Rec Department.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 9.7? Hearing none, Mr. Jablonski, or Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 9.8, Resolution 2281, a resolution accepting a donation of $1,000 for the purchase of equipment for Columbia Fire and Rescue.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 9.9, Resolution 2282, a resolution to ratify the authorization of the City of Columbia to apply for the United States Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Assistance Fiscal Year 2022 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Grant, local solicitation, accept the grant award not to exceed $30,069, and authorize the mayor to execute documents related to accepting and administering the grant.
Move for approval.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye, that item is approved. Now we move into Section 10, Ordinances. Item 10.1, second consideration of ordinance number 4420 as amended, an ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget ordinance number 4404, providing for revisions to the general state street aid, sanitation, capital projects, and wastewater funds.
Move for approval.
That has been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 10.1? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye. Item 10.1 is approved. Next item, 10.2, second consideration on ordinance number 4421, an ordinance to amend the Connect Columbia Comprehensive Plan Use Designation Supplemental Overlay for Tax Map 92, Parcels 11.01 and 11.02, located off Rock Springs Road by removing from Special Area 7 Interstate Gateway. This is Ward 5.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 10.2? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye. Item 10.2 is approved. Next item, 10.3, second consideration on ordinance number 4422, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400. the same being the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia by zoning properties being annexed by resolution number 2268, located off Rock Springs Road at tax map 92, parcels 11.01 and 11.02 to Neighborhood Character District. This is Ward 5.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Item 10.3, any discussion on that item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 10.4, second consideration on ordinance 4423, an ordinance to amend the Connect Columbia Comprehensive Plan land use designation for tax map 112, parcels 22, 23, and 24, located off Trotwood Avenue from suburban neighborhood to suburban corridor. This is Ward 4.
Move to approve.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 10.4? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 10.5, second consideration of ordinance 4424, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400, the same being the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia, Tennessee, by rezoning tax map 112, parcel 23, and a portion of parcel 22 located off Trotwood Avenue from neighborhood large lot character district to commercial planned unit development, Ward 4.
Move to approve.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 10.5? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye. Item 10.5 is approved. Next item, 10.6, second consideration on ordinance 4425, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400, the same being the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia by approved the Highland Convenience Market Trotwood Avenue PUD Master Plan located at 4015 Trotwood Avenue, being tax map 112, parcels 22, 23, and 24, Ward 4.
Move to approve.
It's been moved and properly seconded. That's 10.6. Any discussion on that item 10.6? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye. Item 10.6 is approved. Next item, 10.7, second consideration on ordinance 4426, an ordinance to amend the Connect Columbia Comprehensive Plan land use designation for portions of tax map 90, parcel 30, and tax map 99, parcel 11, located off Tom J. Hitch Parkway from urban neighborhood to urban corridor. This is Ward 3.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 10.7? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye, that item is approved. Next item, 10.8, second consideration on ordinance 4427, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400, the same being the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia, Tennessee, by zoning portions of properties being annexed by resolution number 2269, located off Tom J. Hitch Parkway at tax map 90, parcel 30, and tax map 99, parcel 11, to Neighborhood Character District, General Urban Character District, and General Urban Corridor Character District. This is Ward 3.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 10.8? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin.
Aye.
Mayor Muller.
Aye. That item is approved. Next item, 10.9, first consideration of ordinance 4428, an ordinance for the abandonment of Busby Lane located adjacent to 1705 and 1707 Logan Drive, and authorization to convey ownership of such property to Brewster Neal Pate and wife Shelby Dillon Pate and Gerald M. Towler and wife Shirley B. Towler, trustees of the Gerald Towler and Shirley Towler Living Trust. It's been moved and properly seconded, that being item 10.9. Any discussion? Vice Mayor Martin.
Yes, Mayor, members of council, I'd like to ask the Assistant City Manager to make a comment about this for our staff report. How did we get this on our agenda?
I'd like to ask Paul Keltner to step forward to the podium and address the Vice Mayor's question.
Good evening, mayors and council. I believe the question was how this ended up in front of you. So in this particular area, there is an unimproved right-of-way that's located between two homes. It's been sitting there since probably the 1970s or better. And the owners of those two homes have come together and wish to ask the city to remove that right of way and to vacate that and split that among the two homes there. There is a vacant piece of property that sits to the south of this, but nobody has utilized it, and it is sitting unimproved. So it's just a vacation of right of way.
And Mr. Keltner, that will cause no harm to the city of Columbia, right?
Not necessarily the city of Columbia. I mean, it will have some effects on the property next door to it. But if I understand correctly, they have also signed off on their rights because they do have an equal right to that as well. And they have signed off on that.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
Seems like this is something that comes up somewhat regularly on, a lot of times it's when somebody's trying to sell a property and a title search reveals that there is some abandoned alleyway that the city still has some sort of title to, and they come and clean up. This one may be only a little bit different because they're being a little more proactive and just coming together and doing it during a different phase that we normally see it.
Yes, sir, it's not uncommon for the city of Columbia to have alleyways that are unimproved or are not up to city standard or unimproved alleyways that just never got constructed many years ago, and somebody's trying to clean it up.
All right, Councilmember Marshall.
Yes. This was this kind of came before us before with the project that was going to put 56 houses back there.
That's correct. Okay. I believe that is what prompted the vacation of the right of way. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Brought light to it. Yes, sir.
All right, any other discussion on item 10.9? It has already been moved and properly seconded, so I guess if there is no other discussion, we'll ask Madam Clerk to take the vote.
Mr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. Green, Ms. Hardison, Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles, Vice Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Mayor Moeller.
Aye. Item 10.9 is approved. Next item, 10.10, first consideration of ordinance number 4434, an ordinance to amend ordinance 4400, the same being zoning ordinance of the city of Columbia, Tennessee, by rezoning tax map 73, parcel 18, located at 1647 Old Highway 99 from rural character district to residential plan unit development with PUD master plan approval and established November 10, 2022 as the date of public hearing. This is Ward 4. We do have a couple of individuals who have signed up tonight. First being Kevin Hewlin. Mr. Hewlin, if you'll state your name for the record, tell us your address, and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Vice Mayor, and members of the council. My name is Kevin Hewlin, and my family has owned the property at 1647 Old Highway 99 behind Stan since 1991. My parents settled in Columbia in 1960, and most of my family is still here in Columbia. My father was a small business owner for years in the community, including Columbia Concrete, which began on Cemetery Avenue, and True Value. Though he never served in the public sector as y'all do, he was a very active member of the community. I want to first thank y'all for all you do for the city of Columbia. I appreciate the time and energy that y'all put into serving the public in this way. I know y'all are looking out for what is best for the community. I also know sometimes that might be a thankless position to be in, so thank you. With the help of Charles Hawkins Company, we have found a fantastic company that's interested in bringing their product to this location. We were selective in this process, and we've been thrilled to work with an impressive and innovative company like Core Spaces that shares in the vision of making this property a gateway to the city in this area. They've shown experience and integrity in our dealings with them, and I wanted to share that with y'all. This project is unique, it is high quality, and it seems to fit into y'all's vision of smart growth and will be a great extension of the current Exit 46 T-Dot Bear Creek project. This is an exciting time for Columbia, and y'all deserve a lot of credit for that, and my family is proud to be just a small part of it. The developer is here tonight, as well as Josh Rowland, who's the lead civil engineer with Kimley Horn, and we're ready and willing to answer any questions that you have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hewlin. I do note that Josh Rowland and Aaron Freeman have signed up to speak, so I'm not sure if they want to be proactive or maybe just wait to see if there are any questions, but you're certainly welcome to have the floor. Madam Vice Mayor has a question.
Yes, I do. Mr. Assistant City Manager, can Mr. Keltner
Paul, could you come back?
forward, please? Mr. Keltner, in our staff report, we have a list of PUD variances that are being requested. And while I need to preface this with saying that as we have growth that's been documented in our 2020 census, we also want to make sure, as Mr. Kevin just said, that these developments fit into what Columbia wants in their fair city. So, as we have already talked about some of my concerns, I want to ask these for the record tonight. On that first variance under our staff report on page 7 of 73, can you explain that to me and the rest of council, where it asked about, where it says PUD allows for the vehicle access 24-foot wide private driveways and 16-foot wide private alleyways, and what they're asking for?
And you said that was in the summary requested variances in the staff report?
Well, it's on the page that says Old Highway 99 residential preliminary PUD 1647 Old Highway 99, and it's got the drawing.
Back to the cover page?
Yes,
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
it's actually the cover page.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
It's up to you. Okay. So I guess as we talked in the study session, we did discuss a little bit kind of the uniqueness of this project with regards to previous developments in Columbia. Normally when you think of multifamily, you think of more vertical construction, larger buildings, just being apartment units, and even in some degree, townhomes. This one's a little bit of a hybrid of the two. So it's multifamily, which means to staff is that it's one ownership of all the buildings inside the parcel, which is very common in apartment complexes. This one's taking a little bit different approach in the fact that they're not apartment units, but they're townhomes and single family homes all owned by one entity. In this case, 331 of them would be owned by that single person. What this is saying is, so typically when you see single in conventional construction, when you see single family homes, you see them fronting streets. This one is using a little bit of combination of things. It's got two streets, which is labeled Street A and Street B on your plans there. It has a north-south street that will connect into Quail Run subdivision that's currently under construction. And it also has a stub road that will split off to the west, connecting to the property next door. Those are the only two public streets inside of this. Everything else is accessed by driveways that are 24-foot wide, or alleyways that are 16-foot wide. So the alleyways are just for the rear-loaded townhomes and single family, which that breakdown is 156 single family and 145 townhomes to make up those units. And the driveways are set up more. The 24-foot pavement section is very close to a street standard pavement width. What they've done is they've set it more up in a parking lot type of situation to where when you drive down the drive aisle, you will then go and you will see spread out through the entire development small parking lots to accommodate some overflow parking and to try to make up some parking for some of the variances that you may be getting to as we go down the list there. But that's what that was referring to. So ideally, you would see single family homes fronting streets. This is under your previous ordinance 3638. So that's what that variance is coming from. They would like for these homes to face, some are facing the public street, but the remaining portions, especially in the middle, are actually facing courtyards. Each courtyard has a little bit of a different amenity type feature to it. We refer to it more of cottage housing, but that's what their request is.
So, Mr. Keltner, this is, as already been said, a unique variation of a housing development. So you're saying to myself, asking the question, that this size of the driveways, private driveways, and the private alleyways is okay. It says here in lieu of a private road built to public standard.
Well, that's what typically you would see the street there. So it would be a public access point. This one's actually, since it's all under one ownership, they're requesting for it to just be all private roads, except for those two streets that are more of connecting streets to adjacent properties. Everything else internally with regards to the living structures themselves, except for those two streets, are just accessed by private driveways and private alleys.
And this is coming off of Old Highway 99, which is where this development is. And is there any modifications being made to Highway 99, Old Highway 99, with this project?
Yes, ma'am. There are some turn lanes that the traffic study has shown to be put in. I know we had discussion about some of the conditions on the road, and that would definitely be a recommendation of city staff, is that the road from Bear Creek Pike to Lacey Road meet the standards for that road classification, which would be a minor road for there. But outside of that, it really didn't warrant much. There's other developments in the area that are picking up some of these improvements as well, and some of them are already ongoing.
Okay, I grew up out there, Mr. Keltner, and so I've been on that road 100 years in 2 days. So let's look at the next one, 6.3.3, where it's talking about the restrictions of building permitted on a residential lot. So you just explained to us, because it's owned by one entity, that the variance is to handle having more than one unit on that piece of property. Explain that.
Yes, ma'am. I think in this variance here, it's just a little bit of a misinterpretation. So actually within that section, that 6.3.3, there's actually a numerical subset of that talks about if it's multifamily, then you are allowed to have multiple buildings on one lot.
Okay.
So this actually variance would not apply to this project.
Okay, so this one's not applicable.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. 6.3.8, the 15-foot minimum street setback.
Yes, ma'am.
So what's the range for that?
Sorry.
Go on.
Sorry, I thought she was done. What this is relating to is where we're talking about those public streets earlier. And the street setback for that would be 20 feet. And they're requesting for the public street portion to have a setback of 15 feet instead of the 20. The remaining homes are actually sitting on those driveways and alleyways facing the courtyard, so their setbacks do not apply.
Okay, the setbacks do not apply.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm listening, Mr. Keltner. I made notes this morning. 8.3.2H, the residential PUD, the private road, and the variance on that.
Yes,
Can
ma'am.
you
So
explain?
in townhome developments, it does have a requirement for private yard space, and that can be in the front, side, or rear, and it does have a requirement of at least 100 square feet or more. What this is requesting is for that open space to be capitalized within those courtyards themselves, instead of having a dedicated space for each and every single one of the units. They would be a shared private open space.
So for comparison's sake, normally, well, in previous developments, I would have my little parking spaces in front of me, and I would have some room back behind me.
Mm-hmm.
But with this development, I am entering from the back, from my garage,
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
unless I'm going to walk from my parking space up to the front of my house and come in.
Most of the interior portion of the property would be rear garage only. The perimeter of the property does have front-loaded driveways and garages. It's the 100 square foot, as I stated, is looking at each space, the courtyard space, as well as relying heavily among the other amenities areas to provide some of that outdoor activity.
So, Mr. Keltner, you're going to go a little bit deeper. So when you're saying that the amenities that I would normally have in front of my living space are going to be somewhere else, developed and ready for me to utilize. If I had a 4th of July picnic, I had, 10 other families come into my place, my residence. There's places there in this development where I can utilize that space.
Yes, ma'am. I think the biggest difference is to help understand is that instead of you having a dedicated space, it's yours. It's 100 square feet of just that unit 1A space. What this is saying is you will still have space there. There's still green space there, but it's shared among everybody in the entire development. So you can pretty much use any of the open spaces for whatever activity that you might want to.
Again, this is unique. Okay, let me get to the last one. 10 under that same section, 8.3.2H, where it says 10 and 11 garage parking. Spaces shall be 15 feet wide and 22 feet deep and shall not count for more than 30% of the required parking. So they're asking for a variance on this. Can you explain that variance?
Yes, ma'am. So that was definitely the one that was discussed the most during Planning Commission, and actually during staff review of with the applicant there prior to Planning Commission. So inside the ordinance, it talks about the use of garage spaces within multifamily and townhomes. There is a size as stated there, 15 by 22. It has to be that size to be required, to be counted as required parking. Inside of that, it also has another item of review in there. It's 30%. So even if all your units have a 15 by 22, you can only count 30% of those. So what this request is to have some of the units are smaller than the 15 by 22 garage space, as well as they were like to count all of the garage spaces and not the 30%.
That concerns me, Mr. Keltner. That, this came to us from Planning Commission with a 3-2 vote. And so we're gonna count the garage space in the variance is asking to count the garage space in the 30%
For 100% of it.
for 100% of it.
Yes, ma'am. Including those that do not meet the 15 by 22 foot.
Do you know how many, can I ask that question? Is the city attorney on the line? I'm sorry. Mr. Tisha, can I ask that question? Do we know how many of these are not going to meet the 15? Sure.
I think I know a ballpark number, but that might be a better question for the applicant, Mr.
Okay.
Rowland. They're the
They did add
representative.
some
But
parking since planning, correct?
yes, so they do have, there's 331 units. They do have 328 guest parking spaces that would be surface parking spaces.
Okay.
It's a little bit, when you look at the plan, you can start to see a little bit how complex it is and the fact that some of the, yes, ma'am. So some of the units there do have 2-car garages. Some of the driveways are 2-car driveways. Now, naturally, I think maybe in the parking count, it counts both of them, but in the total count. But in reality, if unit 1 has a 2-car garage with a 2-car surface driveway, then you're only going to count it for 2 spaces.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't count it for 4. So it makes so you've got a mix in there. Not all of them need the variance. There's quite a few that do, but there's some in there that would not need the variance. A 1-car garage townhome would need the variance. And there's some of them that do not have any driveways. They just have garages.
But the variance is to count all of this
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
towards the percentage that's necessary.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Kelp.
Councilman Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have 2 questions for you, Mr. Keltner, and then my third question may or may not be for you or the applicant. But first, what is the city's recourse if this property management company that's going to be maintaining the development, what happens if they fail to keep up with the property or go out of business, or what does that look like for us?
Should they sell it to somebody else who decides, or maybe they're not as good of housekeepers as the previous owners, what we would treat just like any other property maintenance. So we would isolate the owner out and then go after them to update the site or to keep the site up.
So to bring them into compliance?
Yes. So, I mean, if the structures were not kept or tall grass, or if there was parking in other areas outside of the hard surface, those type of scenarios, then property maintenance would come in and issue citations for not meeting our city codes, and then it would be up to the owner. It would not actually be since they're not individually owned, it would just be the owner of the property, the one owner.
So this is the singular owner?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then, Mr. City Attorney, this might be partly for you. How do we enforce that?
Well,
What is enforcement?
worst case scenario, you would have lien rights. If you had to continuously enforce the maintenance of the property, you certainly hope it doesn't get down to that. Now, initially, under the new code, there will be some letters of credit, I would imagine, for maintenance for a certain period of time, but
Landscaping items do. In that regards, we do have a contractor that mitigates properties. So process-wise, if we were unable to get somewhere with the owner, we would mitigate the property ourselves, and then, as Mr. Tischer said, put a lien on the property.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess we already started talking about parking. So my third question doesn't exist. I'll combine it into one. Last one. Do we have just like a simple doors to parking spaces ratio? How many doors there are, and then how many parking spaces per door? Do we have something like that?
Yes.
I know it's not entirely accurate because there's going to be
right.
Some houses have garages, or single car garage, and some are alley loaded. So
single family and townhomes are 2 per unit. Is the easiest way to put it. 2
period or 2 guests?
2 parking spaces per dwelling unit.
Okay.
If it's a 1-bedroom, it's still 2. If it's a 3-bedroom, it's still 2.
Okay. And then the other units, styles, what's the ratio with them?
If you get into apartments, then it can get into the number of bedroom units that then has a calculation for the number of parking spaces.
So would at least each apartment unit have 2 parking spaces?
I would have to look.
Okay.
We're looking at this as when you're talking about the single family and townhomes and 2, and that's how in your plan, that's how they have calculated as well, as 2 per unit.
Okay. And when you say 2 per unit, 2 per apartment unit?
No, sir. 2 per housing structure.
Okay, gotcha.
these are calculated as single-family units. Correct?
That's correct. Yes, they did go the route of calculating it at single family or townhome, which both have a 2-car per dwelling.
Okay. And then just to kind of reference something that you had in the staff report, just insufficient parking and architectural detail remain concerns for staff. Greater detail will be required at the time of final master plan and preliminary plat. Do you feel confident about things being worked out in the way that you can obviously tell planning commission and city council wants to make sure as far as parking goes? Will staff be able to make sure that happens at those stages?
Well, as I stated, the parking really dominated that whole conversation, and there were some other items talked about with regards to the commercial. There is 1 acre commercial shown on the property. It's in the middle versus the front. I think that was discussed just for a minute. We didn't really dive really deep into the architecture of it. There are a couple of different styles that they're proposing within that, and but the parking came to you. They did provide, I believe it's 48 additional parking spaces from where Planning Commission saw it, and they reduced the number of units, I believe, by 30, I believe. So they kind of reduced the number of units and added more parking from where Planning Commission saw it last. And that's what their task was coming out of Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and in fact, if I remember correctly, that when it passed, that was sort of suggested to them that they might take a look at adding some additional parking spaces, which I guess has naturally reduced the overall density.
That is correct. The effect of adding more parking did reduce the density. Yes, sir.
All right. Councilmember Marshall.
On the 11.9 by 22 deep garage, can a car get in that?
Depends on what you drive.
You have to own a Prius, maybe?
Your truck would not.
Okay. Would my FJ? Probably not either.
It might be a little tight, but
so if you have 2 cars the size of cars that I drive, is there a place to park at these places?
Well, I think and I mentioned that to Vice Mayor Martin this morning. You kind of have to look at this project and take it for what it really is. This is a project. While you have other projects going on out at the interstate, you have this node sitting out there at the interstate, and they are isolated in a way. That's why it's considered a node. So this is definitely a commuter bedroom style community that's being requested here. Their market is going to be heavily upon those that are wishing to do that inside that. So it's like going to any situation where you're going into a home that you don't potentially own. You're looking at it. Will that fit my needs for that? Will that home fit me? And if it doesn't, then I have to find somewhere else, or I have to change what I'm doing. I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying that's the mindset when you look at this, is that it's not going to work for everybody. There's no doubt about that. But there is a market out there for a 1-bedroom, single-family home for somebody looking that's working up and down the interstate a good bit. It's about equal distance from Port Royal and the crossings as it is to our shopping area and the Kroger Plaza in that area as well. So it's going to be a split capture rate when you look at it with where they're doing their shopping and how we're subsidizing any of our funds for services, things of that nature. But just keep in mind when you look at it, that's what you're approving. And the applicant's not hiding that fact. They actually made that statement during Planning Commission. So they understand what their market is and what they're requesting here.
So we may not be getting their tax dollars when they're going out shopping.
Well, there's more to it. This will be, if you want to get into the tax routes, it is actually would be taxed at a commercial rate because it's a rental product is what they're requesting here. So it's a little bit different than single family homes in a subdivision with an individual lot. What you may not capture is the same amount of percentage of grocery stores or shopping and things of that nature. You're going to have some there that's going to do that. But it's going to be more spread out as they travel among places. They're going to pass places that they can do the same thing.
What about part of this being the city streets but most of it being private? How will that work?
Yes, sir. So it's delineated basically at every intersection where you have a private street or a private drive. Versus the city street, there'll be a concrete apron putting in there as a transition between the two. They'll be noted differently with regards to that, but it's all owned and maintained by that community, as far as of the private alleys and the private driveways. The only part that would end up coming requested to be public would be that street down the middle and the stub road to the left.
Would there be a problem if something happened with this neighborhood where they had to start selling some of these units?
Yes, it would be very difficult.
Okay,
if not impossible.
Somebody would have to pay to have their street paved. Is that correct?
The owner of the property would be in charge of the maintenance of that.
All right.
We would only be in charge of
Our
the
streets.
city street. Yes, sir.
All right.
Vice Mayor.
Mr. Tischer, can I speak on this item again since I asked questions for about 30 minutes a few minutes ago?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Keltner, I'm still, I understand the development, its uniqueness, and where it's located. 331 units now is a decrease in the number of units, or from it, they were asking for more?
Yes, ma'am. They were.
Okay. I'm just really concerned about this parking availability and the size of spaces or garages for current vehicles to be able to park.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have an option? Do we have an option for, I know this is first reading, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And we've got, you weren't on, Mr. Coleman, you weren't on Planning Commission when this was discussed, right? You were?
First meeting.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm trying to get to how we get a comfortable amount of parking or the size of parking in this unit when we know what size cars are being sold and bought today. And we can't speculate on who's going to live here, who's going to choose to live here, and what they're going to have in the first place. But if somebody comes into this unit, this development, and they have, a husband, a wife, and a driving, child, then you got 3 vehicles. And you're saying that it's probably 2 per unit.
Yes, ma'am. If you look at the own street provided, and if you like I said, there are some that will have the 2-car garage and the 2-car driveways. There's some will only have a 1-car driveway, and then some will have 0 driveways, just garages. So those are the ones that probably impacted the most, the ones with no driveways and just garages. Most of those are 2-car garages that have that scenario of no driveway.
Paul, the 15 by 22 parking, that is a variance request, correct?
No, sir, that is our standard, is
That's
a
the
15
standard,
by
okay.
22, and they have spaces that would be less than the 15 by 22.
Okay. So they're asking for what, did you say?
It varies in spaces and sizes. I think it goes down to 11
All
and a
right,
half.
so one, you asked how you could address the parking. One is you can deny the request for the variance on the parking if you're so inclined to do so.
Because that's a separate variance request up on the
That's one of their-
8.3.2.
That's one of their variance requests, yes.
Anything else for Mr. Keltner for now? Councilmember Hardison.
I think this might be for him. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
A couple of things. What is the lighting situation going to look like? I'm not seeing any in the demonstrations.
Was that light?
Like lighting as far
street
as
lighting.
Mhm.
Yes, ma'am. So it would just follow the normal procedure for street lighting. We work with Columbia Power to lay out the appropriate spacing for the street lights themselves. They'll follow our lead with the LED street lights as well. Typically, you'll see a different style of lighting as you go into private driveways and private parking lots. They'll be lower and not quite as street light, more
Okay.
pedestrian oriented. But at this level, we typically do not see a lighting plan until they move on to the site construction level.
Okay. And also, back on the parking issue, is the way the layout, the larger the home, the more parking spots you have, or not necessarily?
Yeah, so the wider the home, the more parking, and it's more the perimeter of the homes on the perimeter. They do have more traditional parking with regards to driveways and garages. Within the interior of the lot is where you start to see more of just garages being used for parking.
Do we have a price point on what these could possibly go for? Or is it?
That has not been discussed. I don't believe these are for sale on these, so I don't know what they're going to charge for the rate.
Okay, thank you.
And that's not really something that you all can consider, the price.
Councilmember Wiles.
I'm new to this, so I may be asking something that's contained in the 73-page document that I haven't heard, and I'm assuming it has been addressed based on what you've told me how this process works. I'd like to hear from Fire and Safety. Has that already been concerned, how our fire equipment and fire engines would handle no road access to these locations? That may be something's already said, yes, we got it. But
Yes, ma'am. So that was looked at, and what the fire requested was that they use a turn template that takes their largest apparatus and it basically lays it on the driveways and shows that they can make the maneuver. And what we got those dimensions from essentially taking our largest apparatus and doing a test out in the parking lot, and we've got all the dimensions recorded from that, and then that's what they use to show, and they have provided that.
so our confidence is there, and I trust that.
That they can maneuver inside. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wiles. Any other questions for Mr. Keltner? Don't go too far, Paul, but I know, would you like to speak? You signed up tonight, so if you'll please identify yourself and your address, and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Josh Rowland. I'm with Kimley Horn. I'm representing the developer. I just wanted to try to clarify a few of the questions that have come up pertaining to parking, because that was one of the topics discussed at length. And I think the main reason for the interesting voting process was that we were asking to proceed to council as opposed to deferring at planning commission. But during our time between planning commission approval and being before you tonight and last week, We added over 58 parking spaces to the plan and reduced our unit count by 3 units. Currently, we have 3.5 parking spaces per unit. That's almost double your typical requirement for a development such as this. 80% of the homes have 2-car garages, and that's a pretty standard 2-car garage that you would see in a traditional single-family home. It's either alley loaded or it's front loaded. Many of the units around the perimeter of the property that are front loaded units that have their front doors and the garages on the same side on the front of the home, they all have 1- and 2-car driveways in front of those homes as well that are 25 feet deep. We heard from staff early in the process that having deeper garages and deeper driveways was important. So if someone did have a larger vehicle and they wanted to live in this community, they could choose a unit that has that 25-foot deep driveway out in front. We've been very intentional and have worked with the Planning Commission and staff to go back and revisit the plan and add more parking and spaces where they felt like it was a little light, because guest parking is important as well as resident parking. So I think we've been very intentional about how we address the parking, and we feel, given that we're nearing 4 spaces per unit, that this thing is parked very sufficiently. And as far as the property management is concerned, Core Spaces manages over 10,000 units across the country. They're a sophisticated and large and well-funded company. They plan to have 7 people on staff full-time on this property. We'll have 3 to 4 property maintenance and management folks who will have full-time landscaping and unit maintenance. We'll have full-time leasing and facilities and program staff. So this is a very robust business with 24-hour support from the property management company. They do not intend to sell this. They're going to hold it in their portfolio, and this is not the type of project that would get sold off piecemeal in the future. That's why, as Mr. Keltner described it, it's a horizontal multifamily development. I think Paul did a really good job describing how it's very similar to an apartment complex, but we've detached the units and spread them out with a very rich amenity program. We have 4 different pocket parks that are heavily programmed. We have a clubhouse with a resort-style pool and park. We have dog parks, and we have a myriad of other improved open space and trail areas that will be well lit for safety purposes in the evening. So I think I've tried to cover everything on my list.
Good. That's your 3 minutes. I appreciate that. I mean, that was one of the reasons that I was first attracted to the project, was that the amenity package was, as far as I can recall, one of the best that I've seen come through. And I mean, it's truly one that is a different kind of package than what we've seen traditionally. And I was very impressed with that. Can you speak to real quick, I'm gonna give you a little more time now, on this, the build to rent concept? And my understanding, and talking with Paul, I think this is maybe the first such development we've had that's the build to rent concept that's of this nature, because I think that also speaks to a little bit of the diversity of housing portfolio that this project adds to what we currently have.
I think the best way to put it in the correct light context is that there's some of us who are very intent on buying our first house and owning a home, and there are others, as we all know, as the generations change, who are not. They're more transient. They change jobs more often. They're more interested in what we call lock and leave, where they can travel more and have no need for maintaining their own property. This is very attractive to young professionals. It's also very attractive to empty nesters who are ready to not have the burden of homeownership and maintenance. And in the materials that we provided, there's quite a bit of information about that renter profile. And those are the two groups that really look to projects such as this, where they can go to the commercial spot or to the clubhouse and get a coffee in the morning. They can attend yoga classes. They can drop their kid off for daycare. They can use a co-working space. It's a rich amenity portfolio in here, both under roof and a clubhouse, as well as within these park spaces. We have children-oriented parks. We have kind of that young adult-oriented park. We have community garden spaces. So it's really a lifestyle that some choose and some don't. And I think that's probably the best way to describe, a lot of new people moving to Middle Tennessee that are different than, some of the more traditional homeownership mentality.
Councilmember Marshall.
Explain that commercial section you got in there.
We're in the Gateway Overlay District, and it requires a mix of commercial when you're doing residential. We want to internalize the program for this community. And so rather than sticking it out on the edge that's, behind an existing commercial center, we're being intentional about where we put it, and we'll be real intentional about who we market that commercial space to. It could be a small coffee shop. It could be a small, office space. We're not going to put a gas station there. We're not going to put a use that wouldn't be compatible with what we're trying to create in this community.
Dollar General?
Probably not.
Okay.
Of course, the owner of this development is maintaining the ownership of that property, so they're going to have the ability to dictate that as well. Councilmember Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to walk through the parking because I think that's the real linchpin here, and it can be difficult for us to understand it because of the scope, and we have tiny human brains that can't imagine some of the numbers and the ratios and whatnot. So you just kind of correct me if I'm wrong as I kind of say this out loud. So I'm looking at the concept plan that you have, the colorful one with the parking spaces in yellow, the side and the parking box here on the right side of the screen. So we'll start with the community rec building. That's going to have 45 spaces assigned to it or provided for it. The townhomes, the front-loaded units, the front-loaded townhomes, there's 32 of those with 32 of those with a two-car garage. There's another 32 with a two-car garage. There's 56 with a one-car garage. And another 56 with a one-car driveway. Sorry, and I messed that up a little bit. But even the two-car garage ones, you're saying they have a driveway that could fit 2 additional cars in it, correct?
Yes.
So the ones that have two-car garages could essentially house 4 cars on their own space.
That's correct.
Okay, so they're not taking away from anybody else. All right. And then the one-car garages, they could have potentially 2. So it's let's say it's just a young couple or something like that, a young couple with a kid. Mom has a car, dad has a car. One of them gets to have, probably the mom gets the garage. All right, so the alley loaded units, they have 2-car garages. There's 57 of those. Both of those in same situation, 2 cars.
All of the alley loaded townhomes are 2-car garages.
But they don't have the driveway, correct?
That's correct.
So those are the only ones that would be limited to just the amount of car garage space they have. Okay.
And that was probably the areas that were identified by Planning Commission where we were maybe a little light on guest parking in those areas, and that's where we added a significant amount of new parking.
And then we have the single family units. Now moving on to that. So the front loaded units, 2-car garage. There's 30 of those. Again, so those 2-car garages means they also have the driveway space. Okay. Then there's 2-car units, and all they have is driveway. They can fit 2 cars in it,
yes.
Correct? Then the alley loaded units, 2-car garages, 156 of those, and they also have a driveway that could fit 2 additional cars in it, correct?
Correct.
And then, all right, so everybody's now accounted for. So our guest spaces then, we have 328 friends over if they each are driving a car. So that to me, I think I had to really walk it through like that. To me, the way that I realized that this probably is targeted towards my age group. I'm a little bit different, I think, from the average millennial. I like to think myself. I like home ownership, but I am renting at the moment. And so I can see how I know right now I'm renting out a room in my apartment that we only need 2 spaces. We have a friend over. There's 1 other car. We might have 2 cars over, 2 friends over. That's 4 different cars visiting our single unit. And the majority of units can accommodate 4 cars on their property alone without the use of the guest spaces. So thank you for letting me walk through that and hopefully made it not more complicated. That's all I've got. I'm satisfied with the parking.
Thank you, Councilmember Coleman. Good questions. Anything else for Mr. Rowland? Hearing none. All right. Up, Councilmember Wiles.
Yes, I apologize. Have the lighting. Attorney Tischer, this may be something I'm not supposed to ask, so stop me if I don't. Core Spaces is the group who is developing this. Am I correct?
Yes.
Core Spaces. Now, if I look up Core Spaces on the internet, I notice is that the one and only Core Spaces. And where would be the nearest, and may I ask, where's the nearest unit like this that has been developed by Core Spaces? Can I ask that question? I noticed they look like college towns. Tampa, Auburn, Chicago, a lot of those kind of places, which by default I understand the clientele.
Aaron Friedman with Core Spaces is here this evening. I think it's probably best that he answer that.
Is that a question I
well,
may ask?
Mr. Friedman actually did sign up to speak, so
Okay,
I
is
think
that a
that's perfect. Yes, Councilmember Wiles, it's perfect. Mr. Friedman, you've been asked a question.
Thank you, council members. I'd love to answer your question and then just add one anecdote on the parking as well. So you're right, we do. Core Spaces has been a real estate developer for over 10 years, and they've invested and developed, as Josh said, tens of thousands of units across the country. The nearest development project that we're pursuing is in Knoxville, and that's one that we're very excited about. We have a large land assemblage there. The other BTR communities, this style of project would be right now in Texas and Colorado, are where we're pursuing. And if that answer is suitable, I'd just like to touch on the one area of the parking, if that's all right. As Josh mentioned, 80% of the units have 2-car garages. The other 20% have 1-car garages. I would just like to note that 100% of those garages are 22 feet deep. Ordinarily in these developments, we're doing 20 feet deep garages, but it was noted from staff in our review that these should be 22 feet, as Mr. Marshall mentioned. You could park a truck there. That would be no problem.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Rowland or Mr. Freeman or Mr. Keltner or anyone else? All right. So we're back on item 10.10 on first consideration.
Make a motion to approve.
A motion's been made. I'll second the motion. Again, a motion and a second has been made on first consideration for item 10.10. Any further discussion?
Mayor, if I have additional questions, I need to get with Paul Keltner, and he can divvy them out where they need to go.
I think that's appropriate, isn't that right, Mr. Jablonski? And we'll have if it were to pass, I guess you would have between now and second consideration to satisfy those questions, and perhaps the developer and applicant as well. All right, any other discussion on that item? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Ms. Hardison? Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Martin?
No.
Mayor Moeller?
Aye. Item 10.10 passes on first consideration. Next item, 10.11. First consideration on ordinance 4435, an ordinance to amend ordinance number 4400, the same being the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia by rezoning tax map 51, parcels 19, 20, and 20.01, located at Greensmill Road and Nashville Highway from CD4, which is Urban Neighborhood Character District, to mixed-use plan unit development with PUD master plan approval and established November 10, 2022 as the date of public hearing. This is Ward 5.
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Ms. Hardison? Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Mrs. Wiles?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Martin? Mayor Moeller?
Aye. Item 10.11 is approved. Next item, 10.12, first consideration, ordinance 4436, an ordinance to amend the ordinance 3638, the same being the zoning ordinance of the City of Columbia, Tennessee, by amending the Penn Chase Bowling Alley Center PUD Master Plan, now known as the 10 Penn PUD Master Plan, located off Mooresville Pike and East James Campbell Boulevard, being tax map 114, parcel 74, and established November 10, 2022 as the date of public hearing. This is Ward 4. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green. Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall. Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin. Mayor Moeller.
Aye, that item is approved. Moving on now to section 11, other business, 11.1, resolution 2268, a resolution to annex and approve a plan of services for properties at tax map 92, parcels 11.01 and 11.02, including a portion of roadway located off Rock Springs Road into the city of Columbia, Tennessee. This is Ward 5.
Move for approval.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green. Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall. Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin. Mayor Moeller.
Aye. Item 11.1 is approved. Next item, 11.2, Resolution 2269, a resolution to annex and approve a plan of services for portions of properties at Tax Map 90, Parcel 30, and Tax Map 99, Parcel 11, located off Tom J. Hitch Parkway and Iron Bridge Road into the city of Columbia, Tennessee, Ward 3. It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on that item? Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green. Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall. Mrs. Wiles. Vice Mayor Martin. Mayor Moeller.
Aye, that item is approved. There being no need for an executive session tonight, Mr. Tischer, before we move for an adjournment, we'd ask if any council member has anything they'd wish to share. We'll begin with Vice Mayor Martin.
Yes, Mayor, members of council, you should have at your station, thanks to Ms. Liz Bermudez, the CPWS Public Utility Board report from the meeting on September 2022. There's several items that took place there. I'm just going to read the item. If you have questions, you can get with me and I will get an answer. The Fast Charge Tennessee network that will be at East 7th Street parking lot was approved to do the grant. Security services, we did do our 3-year contract. Theft of service and destruction of property policy was updated and modified. Inflow Design Group, IDG, we did approve the scope of professional services for that. 1/0 aluminum underground conductor purchase was approved. And I remind you that some of our purchases have 10-month, 12-month, 18-month arrival dates, even though we're approving to buy this in September. So it's critical that your utility board stay ahead of the game and try to get these things ordered in time to have them in-house when we're doing these extended utility projects. We did purchase, 795 AAC, or the all aluminum conductor purchase was done. That has the same concerns with expected arrival of the product. 2025 double bucket truck was purchased. On the back, we purchased a digger derrick truck, and we also did the pad mounted transformer purchase. Again, the utility items had to be purchased with some of them some horrendous dates of arrival. Secondary underground pedestals purchased, and then Fisher and Arnold Ultim substation construction contract. We finally got that taken care of.
All right. Well, thank you, Vice Mayor. And I just want to point out on that Fast Charge Tennessee network, the grant on the 2 electric vehicle fast chargers,
Yes.
that was a good collaboration with CPWS, the City of Columbia, and Murray County, because that is the county parking lot. It's referred to as East 7th Street parking lot, but it's more commonly known the county parking lot. So I wanted to point that out. That was a good opportunity. Also wanted to just mention, I don't guess we've met as a voting council, although I know there was a study session since the CPD Columbia, our community cookout and event. And I noticed Assistant Chief Haywood's here tonight. I just wanted to express my thanks yet again for a great event. And that event seems to get better every year. It seems like there's more community partners that come to that event. And I think that's just an indication of they want to be there because of how well run it is. And so thanks to your department, Chief Haywood, for that. And I know there's been a lot of fire and rescue activities with Fire Rescue Month and Fire Rescue Week. And so thanks also to Fire and Rescue and to all the departments for all the good work that is being done, everyone which is represented tonight. And then finally, we have on our desk for the City Employee Fall Picnic, which is next Wednesday, October 19th at the Farmers Market Pavilion from 11 to 1. There's going to be plenty of food and prize giveaways. So we hope that all the members of council can attend if they are able. Any other member of council wish to be heard?
I got one last thing I want to say.
You're going to have the last word.
Well, I didn't bring it up when it happened, but we have Mr. Quan McFall backstage, who's a Arts Council member as well. He was with me on that day that were several different times in planning out the Arts Council, the Arts District improvements that we're making. Just community involvement all around. We got the donations to the city. I think there were 5 items where we were being donated to. And so and I think I've said this before, but I think it's really, like you say, good things happen in Columbia, seeing how the community keeps on interacting with us in order to make it better. I think the disc golf people, I feel like they are donating something like every other month. So anyways, it's really great to just see all the community involvement and how people are having their shape, their impact put on Columbia. So.
Sounds like a great last word for me. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved, properly seconded, and may I say, Madam Clerk, Ms. Dale, thank you for your fill-in tonight. I apologize for calling you Mr. Jablonski
Okay.
on 3 different occasions, but I will now ask the Madam Clerk to please take the vote.
Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Hardison. Mr. Marshall.